Did you know that more people now get their news online than from any other source? MaineWebNews.com covers the current events forming the trends of tomorrow. Experience the future of Maine news today at MaineWebNews.com.
One positive outcome of the current economic crisis is that more people than ever seem to be motivated to learn about our monetary policy. Today on Maine Web News, we'll take an in-depth look at this issue. We'll talk to a few Maine politicians, but first, we're going to revisit a little bit of history so that we can properly analyze the current events that'll form the future of our monetary system.
And now, Maine Web News.
Our American founders understood money as the true source of power, and they strongly advised that the government never delegate its authority to issue the currency to a private central bank. Thomas Jefferson said, "I sincerely believe that the banking institutions having the issuing power of money are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies." Abraham Lincoln said, "The government should create, issue, and circulate all currency. Creating and issuing money is the supreme prerogative of the government." In 1913, the United States adopted the two major planks of communism, a graduated income tax and a central bank that called itself the Federal Reserve. The government rejected the wisdom of our American founders and turned over its authority to issue currency to a private group of international bankers. America has never been the same. President Woodrow Wilson, who signed the Federal Reserve Act into law, later said, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." International banker Nathaniel Rothschild summed up the true source of power in the world when he said, "I care not what puppet is placed on the throne. The man that controls the money supply controls the empire, and I control the money supply."
I think it's important that general voters are more in touch with monetary policy in this country. I think it was Rothschild, and I think I'm saying that incorrectly, who said, "I don't care who controls the country's laws, show me who controls its currency or its money, and that's where the power is." And I think most Americans should be concerned with Fed policy for that very reason.
I went to Dartmouth College and I majored in economics, and I've been fairly well confused ever since because I got pretty badly brainwashed. They told me the Federal Reserve was the answer to everything, and I believed them. I needed to pass my courses, and so I wrote that in my blue books. And I graduated because I told them what they wanted to hear. It was only later that I learned that that was all just a scam. Now that's going on in our public schools. Well, the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor a reserve. It is a private bank, and it controls much of the money that goes on in the United States. There have been three previous central banks like that, and those three banks all failed.
They control the flow of money into the banking system, and for that reason I think it gives the taxpayer and the voter every right and obligation to understand what the philosophy and sometimes politics is behind that money.
But the Federal Reserve is uniting people because the money has control, and they keep it pretty much out of sight.
Currently, there is a major grassroots movement to abolish the Federal Reserve. Congressman Ron Paul sponsored a bill last year to at least audit the Federal Reserve so we can finally see what these international bankers are doing with our money.
Only the Federal Reserve can inflate the currency, creating new money and credit out of thin air, in secrecy, without oversight or supervision.
So my question to you is, will you tell the American people to whom you lent $2.2 trillion of their dollars, will you tell us who got that money and what the terms are of those agreements?
We explain each of our programs. In terms of the terms, we explain the terms exactly. We explain what the collateral requirements are. We explain what
to whom did you explain that?
It's on our website.
Yeah, okay.
So all that information is available in our commercial paper program.
And who got the money?
Hundreds and hundreds of banks. Any bank or that has access to the U.S. Federal Reserve's discount.
Will you tell us who they are?
No.
Let me just say this, Mr. Chairman. I have a hard time understanding how you have put $2.2 trillion at risk without making those names available, those institutions public. And we're going to introduce legislation today, by the way, to demand that you do that. It is unacceptable to me that that goes on.
Ron Paul's bill to have a full audit of the Federal Reserve failed to pass by a small margin recently. So how did Maine's 4 representatives come down on this issue? Mike Michuad and Shelley Pingree voted against the full audit after initially co-sponsoring Ron Paul's bill. Olympia Snowe and Susan Collins were completely silent on the issue of auditing the Fed, but did vote in favor of a full audit when it came up to vote. In short, the Federal Reserve is printing money that says United States on it and then renting it to the United States government to use for a fee. Why would the United States government pay a fee to a private company to issue its currency when it has the authority granted by the Constitution to print its own money interest-free? And why would we let them keep their wheelings and dealings in secret?
Well, the Federal Reserve Act was an act of Congress in 1913. It can be repealed by the same Congress. A different Congress because of the turnover of people, but the authority of the body is still there to repeal what they have enacted. It makes it so that money can be taken and printed, essentially, which is an unfair and very hidden tax. It causes inflation. And nobody realizes it because there's more dollars in print because of their handshake relationship with the Treasury. And they write money essentially on nothing, which increases the number of dollars in circulation. That enables the politicians to spend freely, and yet they protest that they have to raise taxes and so forth. The way they're doing it, this printing press makes us independent, and it was Richard Nixon who took us off of the gold standard. When that happened, then all they had to do was just print money, and that's what's wrong with the Federal Reserve.
The whole process is unconstitutional. There is no legal authority to operate such a monetary system. So let's stop it. Let us restore a policy of prosperity, peace, and liberty. The time has come. Let's end the Fed.
So I would strongly not only support but advocate to audit the Federal Reserve, especially when you also consider in our current situation with a $13 trillion debt and $60 trillion of unfunded liabilities. The fact that the Fed is playing an active role in buying U.S. Treasuries, I think also is another reason to consider at least auditing the Fed. And we talked about it previously, is the one thing everybody's talking about, the success of TARP. We still haven't found out where those toxic assets are because they're somewhere off the Fed's balance sheet. So all those numbers I've already given you about $13 trillion debt, $60 trillion unfunded obligation in the long term, and we still have on the Fed's off-balance sheet accounting some $1 trillion amount of mortgages or houses that this country is obligated for. So I think there's a lot of justification into why taxpayers need to be interested in the Fed, and more so an audit of the Fed.
Polls show that over 75% of the American people are now demanding a full audit of the Federal Reserve. The Maine Republican Party recently added to its platform the need to have an audit of the Federal Reserve. Clearly, this will be a major campaign issue across America and in Maine this fall. This is Jared LeBlanc going in-depth on the issues with Maine Web News.
Experience the future of Maine News today at MaineWebNews.com.
Consider making www.mainewebnews.com your homepage. You'll be able to use our Start Page search engine, which does not record your IP address or track your searches like other search engines.